What values are driving your happiness and fulfillment? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we interview difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. I'm your host, Nicole Jansen, and thank you for being here. We have a special guest here today, Dr. John Demartini, who is a world-leading human behavior specialist, researcher, author, and global educator. He is a revolutionary in modern psychology. He has studied human behavior for almost 5 decades and has authored 43 books that have been translated into 40 languages. He has been featured in documentaries like The Secret and has presented his insights alongside some of the world's most influential people like Sir Richard Branson and Deepak Chopra. I'm really excited to have him here today. And we're going to talk about his book, The 7 Secret Treasures, which recently came out, and how living true to your values determines the quality and the expansiveness of our life in all areas. John, welcome to Leaders of Transformation. We're glad you're here today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure. And I want to do a shout out to Erica from Devario Creative, who recommended John for the show. She is a wonderful, just one of the many people that actually support this show, podcast agents and PR agents. And she's just sent us some wonderful guests. And so thank you, Erica. We appreciate you for making this possible. So let's talk about your book. I mean, you have 40 plus books, and, you've written extensively about human behavior. Why this book and why now?
Well, that's a very interesting one. About a little over a year ago, a publishing company approached me and said, "We'd like to do 10 books with you." And I said, "Okay, sounds great." And they said, "What we'd like to do is we'd like to do these topics." And I said, "Fantastic." So I can thank the publishing company to come up with the titles even. The topics were discussed, the titles they partly came up with, but it matched and resonated with something that was important to me. So that's more recently, but way back at age 18, which is now over 50 years ago, I was watching David Carradine on a TV show called Kung Fu.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yes.
But he plays this martial arts, kind of long-haired martial arts guy. And he sometimes flashbacks to his Chinese Shaolin master who taught him martial arts. And whenever he would talk to the master, he would talk to him as his master. And I thought, I want to be a master. And I was 18 years old and I didn't know what that meant exactly. So I went on a quest at age 18 to be a master. Well, master what? I said, well, a master of life. Well, what does that mean? So I then started to probe into what was human behavior, I guess you could call it, and what are the areas of life you could master. And I broke it down into 7 areas. I believe that everybody here has the capacity to master their mind, literally master their mind and create original ideas that serve human beings, that are creative, that contribute, that solve problems. I wanted to create a global company, business mastery, and create a global company, which I set out to do when I was 18, which I've been blessed to do. We have students in every country on the earth. I wanted to create financial independence. I want to have mastery over money, where I wasn't working for money. I wanted money working for me passively, which I've been blessed to do many, many times over. I wanted to have a global family dynamic. When I was 18, I also read a book by Albert Einstein. He says, "I'm not a man of my family. I'm not a man of my community. I'm not a man of my city. I'm not a man of my state. I'm not a man of my nation. I'm a citizen of the world." I named my ship called the world. It's called the world. It goes around the world. Because I want to have a global family where the whole world was home. Instead of walking room to room, I wanted to, either fly room to room or I wanted to sail room to room. Instead of just talking to somebody verbally, I had no problem using technology. Then I wanted to have a global social influence and have leadership there. and hang out with people that have done extraordinary things on the planet. And that was my envision. Master life is to hang out with the people that are absolutely doing the cutting edge stuff out there. And then I want to have a vital body and have more energy at the end of my life than life at the end of my I want to be vital. and I want to be inspired by a mission that is not a religious thing, but an inspired spiritual mission that impacted people. And I wrote all this down when I was 18. And I made a commitment to spend the rest of my life working on that. So this new book, Your 7 Secret Treasures, each treasure is one of those 7 areas. And this is the highest priority actions, methods, principles summarized in a simple, fast reading book to initiate and to electrify the empowerment in each of those 7 areas. So that's the objective. And I found out in 1978 how important human values were in human drive. And so I'm filtering the entire book through the importance of, if you want to learn something, link it to your highest value, or only pursue things that are really deeply meaningful to you, because then you'll absorb it and retain it and apply it. When you're going to work, no one goes for the work for the sake of a company. They go to work to fulfill what they value most. If you can take the job description and the mission and communicate it and link it to what you value most, so you're engaged, you have more fulfilled business career. And then financially, if you don't have a value on money, well, then money goes through the circulation in society according to whoever values it most, they get it. And who values it least gets rid of it. So this is about how to raise it up on your values so you have money working for you instead of you working for it. So you're buying assets, not buying liabilities. Then in relationship, people want to be loved for who they are, and who they are is an expression of what they value most. So learning how to articulate what you value in terms of what other people value, and appreciate what they value and see how it fulfills what you value, increases dialogue and communication, respect, and love for each other. So that is a power of that. And then how to live congruently according to what you value most, and learn the art of delegating and engaging other people, and creating an organization where people are inspired, engaged, and driven by a vision that inspires them, and create some sort of movement in the world, a difference in the world. And then living congruently with your highest values brings autonomic regulation, brings the hemispheric systems into integration, allows the medial prefrontal cortex to emerge and run and govern the amygdala's distractions, and allows you to have homeostasis. And if you're living by what you value most, you're inspired spontaneously to do it. I want people to live an inspired life, and that's what that book is about. That book is just a fast-moving, simple, inspiring book to give you some practical action steps that'll help you go and do something empowering those areas. Because I believe that I don't want to be, I've seen so many people that do really well in business, but then their relationship's divorced and they're killing their finances. Or they're doing great in spirituality, but they have no grounding in business. Or they're got a great relationship, but then there's no business, or, there's no health or something. I believe that you can empower all areas, and any area of your life you don't empower is an area that other people will overpower you in. And you're not a victim of their overempowerment. They're just catalyzing you to get empowered and get frustrated enough to stand up and get empowered. So I'm interested in helping people do that with that new book. And all the books I've done, I've written way more. I've written over 300 books. 43 are just little self-help personal development books. But I write textbooks and I write all kinds of things. But all of it is about the mastery of life. Everything I'm doing is about how do you master whatever it is that you feel is your calling on this planet.
I love in your book, to your point, you were talking about the gentleman who came to you, and this is when you were practicing as a chiropractor, and he came in and said, I want to be more successful in my business. And you said, how are you already successful? And he's like, no, you don't understand. I want to be more successful. And you helped him to see that he was already successful in all these other areas. And he was comparing himself in that one area to someone who, when he looked at the rest of those areas of this person's life, that person didn't have success. Can you talk about that comparison and what it does to us? Because I think that's very common, right? We look at I want this, I want that because they have that. And it's, yeah.
The number one thing I find people do that undermines their love and appreciation for themselves and their empowerment is they compare themselves to others and put people on pedestals, inject the values of others, and cloud the clarity of their own mission and their own primary objectives, and then wonder why they're thinking they're not successful, or wondering why they think they've got limited beliefs, or wondering why they think they've got sabotage or whatever. Whenever you would compare yourself to others, Einstein warned against it. He said, if you're a cat comparing yourself to a fish, you're going to beat yourself up because you're not swimming too good. Or if you're a fish expecting to climb a tree like a cat, you're going to beat yourself up because you don't have the claws. But if you honor who you are, a cat, and you master climbing, you're going to be grateful for your life. And that's a lot of people are comparing themselves to others and putting people on pedestals, injecting their values, comparing themselves, wondering why they can't stay disciplined, reliable, and focused on something that's not really important to them, they think it is. Or they're doing the opposite. They're looking down on people and exaggerating themselves and projecting unrealistic expectations on others for them to live in their values. And these are both futile. And they both basically undermine the vitality of the individual. And they create symptoms as a feedback to let you know, hey, this doesn't work. Wake up. But nobody's teaching people what that really represents. A lot of these symptoms that people are exploiting, best way I can say it, exploiting, are not even symptoms. They're normal biological responses in the physiology and psychology, letting the individual know you're not pursuing what is truly meaningful, priority, and important to you. You're subordinating or superordinating, and you're distracting yourself by trying to change you into others or others into you, which are both futile. Instead of being and comparing your daily actions to your own highest values and prioritize your life and surround yourself with people that would love to do all the things that are lower on yours that devalue you, and get on with what's important. Many people say, well, yeah, but you're wealthy, you can afford to do it. No, I became wealthy because I did that. People think if you do that, it's going to take money. It doesn't take money to invest in somebody who is engaged in doing what you'd love to delegate, and they do a greater job than you do, so you can be free to go do what your core competence is and excel and go and serve. Because there's nothing more important, nothing more meaningful from my observation of asking millions of people than doing what you love doing that makes a contribution and service to people, and hearing people say, thank you, you've made a difference in my life. That's what is there more important than that? What's more valuable than that, really?
Yes. Let's talk
That could
about
be your
that.
kids, your family, your loved ones. It could be anybody that's saying that, but making a contribution, doing something that's inspiring that you spontaneously love to do, and do it in a way that you're remunerated for doing it and having a sustainable, fair exchange, and doing that where it brings you a tear of gratitude on a daily basis for being able to be of service, doing what you love. That's where the power is.
Yes. I hear in that permission is giving ourselves permission to honor the highest values that we have. Now, do you see that sometimes values need to be changed? Or is it our perception about our values that needs to be changed? Like if we're not in alignment. Yes, go ahead.
It could be the one, because let's say that you have been setting goals that are according to other people's values. And if all of a sudden you wake up and you realize, no wonder I'm banging my head against the wall. No wonder I'm beating myself up. No wonder I'm not staying disciplined and focused. I'm trying to be doing something that's lowering your values. Anything that's high in your values, you're disciplined, reliable, and focused on it, raises your self-worth, expands your space and time horizons, and wakes up your leadership and your appreciation of self. Your self-worth goes up. Anytime you're doing lower value systems, your self-worth goes down. You procrastinate, hesitate, and frustrate. You need outside motivation to get you to keep doing it. That's not where it's at. And so the symptoms of that aren't mistakes, aren't weaknesses, aren't flaws as they've been told to be, so people can sell you something. It's a perfectly normal, healthy biological response for you to get message that you're not pursuing what's true for you. And you have that feedback, and it's a great feedback, and it's guiding you. But if you're holding on to your fantasy and beating yourself up because I want this fantasy, I want to be this fantasy. I was speaking in Johannesburg, and there were about 5,000 something people there. And it was on business and wealth building and things like that. It was a success rally. What do they call it? Success summit. And I asked, how many of you would love to be financially independent, where your passive income exceeds your active income? Well, everybody put their hand up. Some people put their leg in the air. Some had two hands, a leg. They were putting their elbows up, whatever it is. Usually the people that were most adamant about it were the people that needed it the most. The people who were more calm about it and already knew what it took to be financially independent would just sat there calmly like that. And I said, great. I said, now that 99.9999999% everybody's got their hand up, what percentage of people actually obtain it? That actually have passive income exceeding active income. They don't have to work. They work because they love to. And I heard all these different variations from 1 to 5%. I said, it's less than 1% worldwide. Worldwide, total numbers of people, it's less than 1%. I said, so 99% of you to 100% of you have your hand up and only 1% statistically going to do it. Don't you think that's kind of odd? Somebody bullshitting themselves, excuse the expression. That's spiritual, harmonizing, intelligent truth. It's a sacred acronym. So somebody's BSing themselves. Who is it? And of course, they're pointing to everybody else but them. I said, let's find out. Let's find out who it's going to be. Would you like to know who it is? Yeah. Get a piece of paper out. And I'm going to give you $10 million. Just close your eyes. Imagine you've got 10 million US dollars, not Zimbabwe dollars. US dollars, you got 10 million. Now, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to write down the 10 things you would do if you received $10 million. The 10 things you would immediately do. I'm going to say on your mark, get set, go. You're going to have 60 seconds to write the 10 things you would do with that $10 million. And at that 60 seconds, I'm making you stop. So you better write fast. On your mark, get set, go. And people all excited and enthused. I got $10 million right there in their mind. I said, stop. Turn it to the person on the left. Whoever received that, I want you to do the best estimate calculation you can to find out how much of the money is left that's truly now an asset that's going to be working and producing a return that is invested.
So good.
And in that room, 20 to 80% of the room, pardon me. Most of the room wrote, they already spent 20 to 80% within 1 minute.
Wow.
That means only 20% of all those $10 million, that's $2 million, was left for assets. They bought that house, they bought that car, they bought this trip, they bought this thing for the family, they bought this yacht, they bought this thing that, they bought consumables that depreciated in value and even liabilities. They didn't buy assets. I said, all of those people, unless we have a change in values today, or something catalyzes a change in values, the hierarchy of your values is dictated by your financial destiny is dictated by your hierarchy of values. Tell me what your hierarchy of values. I'll tell you what you're going to write. I'll tell you what you're going to do. All of a sudden, everybody's quiet. And they went, whoa. And everybody knows now what I just did because they just saw it. I said, now, those people that wrote down, they've invested immediately into assets, so it was going to give them a passive income, so they would be financially independent. Would have been financially independent that day. They would have been started to be financially independent. Every day they live beyond that. If as long as they live beneath the means, they would have just been financially independent, compounding. I said, the reason why people aren't financially independent has nothing to do with how much they make. It has everything to do with what they do when they manage it, which is the hierarchy of their values. So I made them wake up and I said, now we got two choices. We can either change the goals and quit living in a fantasy and beating yourself up, going, why am I not being financially independent? And set goals that are reasonable. I want to be a poor and I want to have a lot of stuff and I want a house that's cluttered and I want to look good in front of things. And let's write goals that match your reality. So at least you can have fulfillment, because goals that don't match, what's real for your values is unfulfilling. Or let's change our values today. So you make a decision, because today you're going to write goals. They're going to match your values. You're going to change your values to match your goals. But unless those are congruent, not likely to happen. You're not going to walk your talk. So people sat there. Do I really, really, really have what it takes to do what it takes to go build wealth? Do I really want that? Or is it just lip service? Is it just a thing because of what other people think? Because am I really just spending every dollar and always on debt month after month after month, just getting by? And really some soul searching happened. I said, now I'm going to give you an option to change your values. For the next 25 minutes, we're going to do a little science here on how to shift your values. But unless you do that, the probability of you doing what you're doing and continuing what the path is very high. And so I really had their attention. The next speaker was a bit of a sales guy and had planned on selling them how to get rich overnight, which is opium.
You just blew that up.
I'm not into that. I'm an educator. I like to give people real grounded stuff. So then I said, there are 6 common denominators that I found in super wealthy people. And I've interviewed over 100 billionaires, and I'm a pretty wealthy guy too. And I've been blessed. And I know a lot of centimillionaires and things. There's hundreds of those. So I said, I've gone through and analyzed the values of people that have debt, and I have people that have okay, and people that are financially independent, and people that are super abundant. They have different values. They spend their money differently. They have different objectives. But this is what I found common in six common things I found in the super wealthy people. If you're interested, you can write them down. And then what we're going to do is we're going to then ask, what would be the benefit of acting on these values? And we're going to stack up advantages over disadvantages until the advantages over disadvantages creates a Skinner operant conditioning change in the way you perceive and neuroplastically alter your brain. So now, instead of going and buying that immediate gratifying consumable, you're now going to buy an asset. And the moment you do that, I know you really have changed. Until then, it's just all lip service. And if you're buying assets on a weekly basis, then I'm going to believe you. Yeah, but if you're coming up with excuses, I can't do this, and this is what's happening. My parents did this and this and that. Excuses are people that don't really have a value on it. So I gave them these 6 steps, and I told them to write down 200 benefits, and don't stop at your comfort zone. It won't make any difference. At your comfort zone, at that moment is when you actually start to make a change in neuroplastically. And I gave them the 6 steps. One was, if you're not dedicated to serving people, ever greater numbers of people, and building a business that serves people, that really truly fills the needs of human beings on the planet, don't expect a source of income. If you don't have a work ethic to serve, why would you expect to have reward? Getting something for nothing isn't real out there. So write down 200 benefits of dedicating your life to being of service to people in some capacity, directly or indirectly, seeding a company, having people that are experts running it, or doing something that really makes a difference that's inspiring to go and make a service. Number 2, managing that a business where it's effective and efficiently and maximizing profits, which allows you to now hire the best quality people and do it at the lowest quality price for the customer, which gives you a competitive advantage and to maximize your profits. Number 3 is saving an ever-progressive portion of profits, where you're incrementally saving more and more and more and more until the cash reserve is so stabilized that you've got a darn near 6 months to a year's worth of capital sitting there. So there's no anxiety, and you got there's no anxiety about your business. 4, you're investing in ever greater degrees of leverage, where you're learning how to invest in stair-stepping mechanisms based on probabilities and mathematics, and knowing what the real objective means are of these types of investments. So you're not gambling and getting rich quick mentalities. And then accumulating a fortune, and then creating a financial cause that leaves a legacy. Those 6 things. Write down the reasons why you're committed to doing that. And then you're going to play in the playing field of people that they've learned. That's what it takes. Because living in a fantasy of getting on a crypto and going and making billions on a crypto or something like that is delusional for most people. And that's what people do. They're in their amygdala. They want immediate gratification instead of long-term vision. And unless you can defer gratification, wealth isn't really reality. Because you keep wanting to spend it on things that go down in value and accumulate stuff and fill up your house with brands that are overpriced that you live vicariously through to keep up with the Joneses who don't care anyway, instead of building a brand around your own life and doing something meaningful that contributes and having people want to help you build your brand and wealth. That's because they can see a real legitimate person that's dedicated to service, that has integrity. Those change people's lives.
Wow. That is so powerful. I mean, I know that you've been teaching this for years and you've seen the impact of it, but just even as you went through that, I'm like, wow, that is so simple and yet so powerful. I find that like wisdom is simple. And even reading your book, it's like, it's so simple. We we make it so complex. One of my favorite quotes is, the genius is taking the complex down to the simple. The fool takes the simple and makes it complex. So you talk about this idea of the values, and there's a change in perception that I heard through your whole book and what you were just sharing. It's this change of perception of how we see things, and so where do you see, this is, we were just talking about creating that wealth as that great example. Where else do you see that right now that we need that change in perception?
Well, I think it all boils down to one simple act, and this is filtered through my reality. So you just take it for what it is. It's biased through my reality, obviously. But my observation, I've been studying this human behavior thing for 50 years, and every human being has a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most to least important in their lives. Whatever's highest on their value is has an intrinsic calling to be acted upon. You spontaneously are inspired to do what you love that's highest on the value. But as you go down the list of values, they become more extrinsic, and you need external motivation to get you to do it. So, for instance, the mom doesn't have to tell Billy, now do your video games and stop doing your homework. Right? That's not real.
That's true.
But she'll say, stop doing your video games, do your homework, which means she'll project on her values onto you. You need to do your homework. And he just wants to do his video games. That's what he spontaneously wants to do. Now, he doesn't realize, and mom doesn't realize, that the company that owns the video game has specialists in human behavior trying to figure out what are the kids' values, and they're mastering the art of communicating in those kids' values and vying their attention, getting their attention. And instead of bitching about, which is beautifully inspired teacher of conscious humanity, inspiring neurological growth. I use cuss words that are sacred acronyms. So instead of bitching at the YouTube video games, why don't you learn what they're doing and then care enough about your child to find out what is intrinsically valuable to the child, and then making a masterful art of communicating what will help them in terms of their values, so they can see by doing this, they're going to get what they want. That's all the video game is doing when it's selling it to them. I've taken thousands of kids that weren't doing well in school and showed them how to excel in school in a very short few hours. Because once I take what's important to them, what their life demonstrates is important to them, and link the classes to it, they now want to go to class. So every child wants to learn. They just want to learn what's important to them. And if they don't see how the classes are going to help them get what they want, they don't want to go to school. Same thing at work. When people go to work, if they don't see how their job duties are helping them get what they want in life, they're not engaged. They're just taking a job. They want to get a break. They live break to break and vacation to vacation and retirement instead of engagement and doing some service. So the key is to find out what's really, really, really intrinsically, truly, powerfully visible as a demonstrated value in their life. And I've worked on a value determination process for that objective that's free on the website that we have. But just if they would just do that and learn that and start setting goals around that, start prioritizing daily actions around that. The moment you fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain. The forebrain has the executive center, the medial prefrontal cortex. It has nerve fibers that go down into the amygdala, and with glutamate and GABA, the facilitator and inhibitory transmitter, goes in there and calms down the impulses and instincts of avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, which are the two dominant distractions that human beings have in their life, and calms them down and allows them to be focused and disciplined and reliable. I've studied the neurology. I'm writing a new textbook on neurology right now, in fact. I studied this neurology. I taught neurology 45 years ago. I've been studying this for a long time. And the brain it's doing everything it can to try to get people to be authentic, because their ontological identity is revolved around their highest value. Their teleological purposes is revolved around their highest value. Their epistemological pursuit of knowledge and core competences revolves around their highest value. And this is where they pursue challenges that inspire them and wake up genius. A genius is sitting inside everyone. But as long as you're doing something you're not inspired to do, you won't ever see it. But the second you pursue challenges that inspire you, that want to solve, kids that love solving the video games outwin the video games, and they go to the next level. And you know, the people I know that are going out and doing extraordinary things and making extraordinary wealth are the people that ask, what is the biggest problems on the planet that I can go out that would inspire me to solve? They're not trying to avoid challenges and seek ease like the amygdala. They're pursuing challenges hermetically and going out and activating their genius and potential and innovative, creative ideas to solve those problems. And that's the most fulfilling. Most fulfilling thing an individual does is to solve a problem that's deeply meaningful, that makes a difference in a vast number of people. And when you do that, I mean, they're the disruptors on the planet. So identifying what's highest on the value and prioritizing that. You're not going to live an inspired life if you're doing low priority things, but you will live an inspired life if you master the art of prioritizing and filling your day with high priority actions so it doesn't fill up with low priority distractions, and saying no to things that need any form of external motivation, and hiring some specialist that has it higher on their values, their highest value, so you can delegate that, so never have to think about it, never have to micromanage, never have to push people uphill, and free yourself up to go and do what you're actually inspired to do, to solve problems, to make a difference, and build a company in some cases, or whatever it is, build a cause.
Wow. I'm so enjoying this, and I have so many questions that come up from what you're talking about. I do want to ask you, thank you for this. I really, really appreciate it. I do want to ask you about affirmations and visualization, and because you talk a lot about it in your book, and I know that even in The Secret, talk about the visualization, the law of attraction. What makes it so effective, and how do we do it so that it is effective? Because I know that I preface that because some people do affirmations and are like, oh, they didn't work. Well, of course, what you're talking about is that misalignment with their highest values. But you just give us a little bit more understanding of that. How do we do that so it can be super effective?
The esoteric and new age self-help fraction thinks that an affirmation is some positive statement that you say to yourself. And that's not what it is. It wasn't originally that way. An affirmation means to make firm in one's mind, a statement of firmness in one's mind. It wasn't affirmative versus negative positive statements. I'm always happy. I'm never sad. Every day I'm getting happier and happier and all that kind of crazy stuff. All that's going to do is create a bipolar condition, because you're going to be striving for that which is unobtainable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable, and divide yourself up instead of integrate yourself. An affirmation is a statement of firmness that is built on a principle that's congruent with what you value most, that's objective, and that is really, truly a balanced equation. Let me give you a story, an example, and kind of make sense out of it. Let's say I'm a single guy, and I'm looking for a single girl, or a single girl looking for a guy, or a single girl for a girl, or anywhere in the spectrum today. I got to add that, right? Anywhere in the spectrum, whatever you're looking for out there. You might be looking for a dog, I don't know. But you're going out and you all of a sudden meet this person, this individual, this humanoid, maybe AI for all we know. But if you have a fantasy that they're going to be always nice, never mean, always kind, never cruel, always positive, never negative, always peaceful, never wrathful, always giving, never taking, always generous, never stingy, always considerate, never inconsiderate, always, one-sided, are they going to live up to that?
Oh, no. Be so disappointed. Yeah.
It's a delusion.
Yeah.
Anytime you're expecting another human being to be one-sided, you have a delusion, an unrealistic expectation, and a fantasy, and you will automatically end up with what I call anger and aggression, blame and betrayal, criticism and challenge, despair and depression, desire to exit and escape, futility and frustration, grouchiness and grief, hatred and hurt, irritability and insanity, jadedness and jerkiness. I could go on down the alphabet. So you're automatically going to have that as a symptom to let you know that you're having an unrealistic expectation, and the ABCD of negative experience is going to happen. Because the more you're looking for a positive, you get the negative to balance it, because it's a pole, like two poles of a magnet. You can't divide it in half and get one side. So that's one. The second one is having an expectation of them, this other individual, to live in your values. Your pride and self-righteousness arrogantly projects your values on them and expects them to live in your values. And most people have to learn the hard way. That doesn't work. But people try to do that. So if you're expecting them to live in one-sided world and live outside their values and inside your values, you've got a delusion. And you're going to have these negative repercussions. And those negative repercussions are your friends. They're trying to associate pain with false expectation. To break the addiction to these false expectations, you need the depression. Depression's not your enemy, it's your friend. Your depression is trying to let you know you're comparing your current reality to a fantasy about how it's supposed to be, and it ain't that way. So setting up an affirmation that I'm always happy and every day I'm getting happy and happier, or I'm always nice, I'm never mean, or I'm kind, I'm never cruel, or those kind of things are completely delusional, and they will backfire. But if you say, whether I am supported or challenged, whether I'm praised or reprimanded, whether I'm been given generously or people have been stingy to me, I know that both are balanced like a yin and yang, and both are keeping me authentic and centered to help me fulfill my purpose. If you make a statement from the neck up that is a true affirmation that's objective and balanced and truly congruent with what you value, then you're getting reminded of how to live masterfully. That affirmation is a fantastic thing to have running through your head. I have hundreds of pages of those that I've been running in my head for years, so those are fantastic. But setting up a one-sided idea, I'm always happy, I'm never sad, I'm always kind, I'm never cruel, I'm always positive, never negative, I'm always peaceful, I'm never wrathful, I avoid all negative people. That's not possible. These are all delusions. Anytime you're dealing with absolutes in a relative world, you have a delusion. Anytime you have a positive one side without the other side, you have a delusion. Anytime you're expecting somebody else to live in your values or you to live in other people's values, you have a delusion. Anytime you expect the whole world collectively to be one-sided, always peaceful, even though the global peace thing shows a perfect balance across the world, people live in a fantasy. They're going to have a one-sided world. And they expect mechanical objects to be one-sided. You're expecting your computer to always do what your mind says that you would like it to do and live in a fantasy. Those fantasies and those kind of affirmations will be self-defeating. They'll devalue you. You'll wonder what's wrong with you. You'll think there's something that's not working. You'll think, well, I must not be saying them right. And then some person will exploit that, because the fastest way to disempower people is to promote a moral hypocrisy and an idealism that's not obtainable by a human being. So they feel guilty for being who they are. And now they're gullible and vulnerable to being controlled. That's if you study that, you'll see that's a very common thing in religion, politics, psychiatry, psychiatric work, psychology, and even healthcare. They love to promote those fantasies. It's the opium of the mass, the 4 opiums of the masses.
The 4 opiums. Talk about that.
Yeah, I call it physiological, psychological, sociological, and theological are the 4 primary opiums. They're also the 4 largest financial institutions on the planet. Because the majority of people are not aware of what their life is really about. They don't take the time to look at what an objective is. If I come to you and I say, you're an individual, you have a set of values. If I communicate in your values, I'll get a nice pussycat. If I go against your values, I'll get a mean tiger. I have an expectation that I'm going to get a little of both, because I'm not always going to be on the cutting edge and always be talking always in your values, because I've got millions of people. They all have different values. I'm going to please some and I'm going to be teasing some. So I have to face reality that it's going to have support and challenge. And it's been biologically shown in evolutionary biology that you must have support and challenge to grow. Imagine if you had prey without predator. You'd be gluttonous and fat and lose fitness. If you had predator without prey, you'd be emaciated and starved and lose fitness. But you put prey and predator, support and challenge, parasympathetic and sympathetic stimulants in there, and you have maximum fitness, maximum overall autonomic regulation. So I'm not a believer of one-sidedness. Those are false, quote, affirmations. I'm a believer of setting up a statement that's true, that's objective, that you can obtain.
You mentioned about depression, and I think about depression, anxiety, and I think about the whole COVID and how people freaked out and and got all stressed out. It's what you're talking about right here. It is this expectation, this false expectation of life should be like this.
Yeah.
And then when it's not like that, then we have all of these reactions to it. And I think that's so important for us to recognize that, because then it's like I love what you said there about what you're trying to have other people live by your own values. It's like frustration. I've said that frustration is expecting someone to do what you want them to do. And who are you to say what they should or shouldn't be doing? So
That's
that.
You self-righteous, arrogant individual projecting your values onto others and expecting them. That's why I don't promote forgiveness and apologies, which shocks everybody. Because forgiveness assumes you did something that I am too proud to admit I've ever done, even though I'm pointing my finger at you and having three it back at me. And I'm blind and unconscious of where I've done that. And the only reason I'm upset is because you're reminding me of what I feel ashamed of in the past. And the truth is, you don't even need to be ashamed for being a human being. But
Yeah.
So I'm not into that. I'm interested in going and asking the question, what specific trait, action, or inaction do I perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that I dislike most? Write it down and get really precise, not vague generalities, but what precisely is the action they did? Great. Now go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait, action, inaction. And where was it? When was it? Who'd you do it to and who perceived you that way? Where was it? When was it? Who'd you do it to and who perceived you that way? Where was it? When was it? Who'd you do it to and who perceived you that way? And do it enough times until you discover that whatever you perceived in them, you quantitatively and qualitatively have done the same thing. And that's the only reason you're reacting to them, because you're storing a shame in the past that you're trying to cover up with pride and arrogance and trying to pretend you don't do that. But the truth is you're doing it. And I've taken hundreds of thousands of people through that process. There's no doubt in my mind that's true. So when people go in there and they discover that, they calm down their little pride for a second. They go, who am I to judge them? Then I go to a moment where and when I perceive them doing it, this trait that I despised. And in that moment, how did it benefit me? Well, it didn't. No. You have control over your perception, decisions, and actions. It's not what happens to you, it's what you're perceiving it. So how did it benefit? Because John Milton said you can make a heaven out of a hell or a hell out of heaven. And you can have a terrible thing, and a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years later, you can look back and say, thank God for that. So why have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process when you can find out the wisdom right there without it? So let's look. And I have people go and find out the benefits. How does it help them spiritually, intellectually, business, finance? And then all of a sudden they go, never even asked that question. I just assume because of moral hypocrisy that that's black and white, bad. And I don't do that because I pride myself in never being that way, even though I'm a hypocrite. And then all of a sudden they go, well, that actually served me. That opened up the door for things. That actually made me more resilient and more independent, made me an entrepreneur, made me go on my personal development journey. And maybe you want to know how the world is set up and how people function, made me more effective in communication, made me go and study harder. And now I think about it, if I hadn't had that happen, I wouldn't be where I am today. Thank you. And you stack up enough benefits to it where it's on the way, not in the way. And then you realize there's nothing there to forgive. There's nothing there to be self-righteously assuming was painful. It's just an illusion. Anaxagoras 2,500 years ago said that pain and pleasure are simply lopsided perceptions. Be accountable to balance your equation, and they go away. And all your infatuation, resentments that you put on people on pedestals and put people in pits on, occupy space and time in your mind until the day you actually balance them out and realize they were your illusions, nothing to do with those people. You have false attribution biases, false causalities, the Eastern Buddhist karmic wheel from that because of your own delusions. Not because it's real, but because of your perception of what's out there. Take command of your perceptions, take command of your priority actions, make a decision which one's the wisest in the moment, and watch what happens to your life. It starts to unfold beautifully.
Wow. I remember my husband, and we actually got divorced and just got remarried, which is a whole story in itself and just a wonderful experience. I remember standing in the courthouse, the divorce court, and he said to me afterwards, he says, I hope you can one day forgive me. And I said to him, there was a lot of work that had to be done because it was a time where I thought he needed to be forgiven. And I said to him, there's nothing to forgive. Thank you because of you, because you didn't plan that, you didn't intend that consciously, but it was the greatest learning opportunity of my life. And it's just what you just said there. And it's like, there is such freedom in that. There is such peace in that. There's such joy in that. And
there's nothing to forgive.
So good. There's nothing to forgive. If anything, there's gratitude. There was so much gratitude.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's it. I say the only time I ever use the word forgiveness is thank you for giving me this experience. That's it.
Yeah, that's good.
Can I share a story? A cool
Please.
story?
Yes.
I had a lady that came to my signature program, the Breakthrough Experience, which I've done 1,170 times now, presented it. And this lady attends it. And she's running her racket, the psychological racket. Well, my mommy abandoned me and I was, abused and this. And she just went on and on and on. And you just go, get a violin out. Come on, let's go. She's getting more sympathy and more attention and getting other people to do stuff for her. And this is a strategy she's using in order to get what she wants, but she doesn't even know it herself. I said, so stop the story. I have no interest in story. It's not even real. I'm going to prove that to you in a minute, but I want you to answer this question. What did you think you had that you thought was so terrible? Well, my mom, you abandoned me. Great. Go to a moment when you perceive your mom left. Go to that moment, a real moment. Okay. What specific trait, action, or inaction do you perceive you're missing and you feel you got left out? And started listing them. She listed nine things. I didn't get it fixed. I didn't get guidance. Good. Then I went over and once we listed them all, I said, is there anything else you missed out on? No, that's it. Okay. Now, who provided? Because the master lives in a world of transformation, never the illusions of gain and loss. So who took on that role? Because nothing's missing. It's in a new form that you haven't been acknowledging. Who took on that role the moment your mom left? Who started giving you guidance? My aunt. Who else? My grandmother. Who else? Ooh, my best friend's mom. Who else? I really got close to one of my teachers. Who else? And then when the teacher changed the room, who then became during the time the next class came? Another friend and mom. I used to stay over at their house all the time. And who else? My aunt got me music lessons and I had this lady helping me and she was guiding me on music and my mom would have done some music. And I showed her that everything that she thought she missed in that was accounted for quantitatively. And she stopped and she goes, I said, is it quantitatively equal now? And she goes, it is. I never would have imagined it. 39 years with a psychotherapy kept her the victim.
Yeah.
30 minutes of asking questions started liberating her. So I said, now let's go to the next one. And the next one. And we did that for every one of them until every one of them was accounted for. And she realized I didn't miss a thing. I had everything I was looking for in another form. I said, great. Now the next question is, what would have been the drawback? Let's go back to the moment you perceived your mom actually doing it before she left. And in that moment, what were the drawbacks? Every trait's got a benefit and a drawback. If you see the benefits without the drawbacks, you're infatuated, you're blind, you're unconscious of the downside. If you're resentful to it, you're unconscious of the upside. Let's be fully conscious. What were the drawbacks when she did that, when she did it? And she started to think, well, at first there was no drawback. She said, you said that before you even thought, which means you just ran that as a repeated story and parroting of what your therapists have told you. Stop that. Answer the question. What would have been the drawback if your mother had been there that way? I can't see it. Look again. Because when somebody says, I don't know, I can't see it, in 1 second after you ask, they really didn't try hard. Let's look harder. And as she started to probe, she closed her eyes and then she started crying. I said, what is it? She said, something my aunt said that all of a sudden makes sense. I said, what did your aunt say? Whoa. She started bawling, crying. I said, what? She said, I just realized this and I just couldn't hear it then. My aunt told me when I was very young and I asked, why did my mom leave me? She said, because your mom had bipolar condition and left you in a bathtub and you almost drowned. And so she came to her sister, me, and said, I'm afraid that this precious daughter of mine will not make it if I'm the one mothering her. The most difficult thing in my life is to give her away. But I just don't want to ever destroy my daughter. It's scared to hell out of me. So she gave that daughter away. And this entire God blessed story, and the therapist said, you're a victim. Your mama was a dysfunctional person. And all these labels people put on people. That's not the truth. That's a disempowering construct. And then all of a sudden she realized that what's then the benefit of the mother, the aunt doing it? She answered my questions. She was patient. She had a higher education. My mom could never have done that. She was not able to hold a job down. I mean, she was literally a homeless person. I would have been on the streets. My mom cared enough about me to give me a better life. And my grandmother was the most generous person. She didn't have a lot, but whatever she did, she made sure I got my education. And the lady, I would not be doing some of the jobs that I'm doing if it wasn't for what that lady, that best friend's mom. And the teacher, I used to spend after hours in front of the teacher until 5 o'clock. And then my aunt would come back from work and then I would do it. I'd spend time with her and she was my mom and was doing nothing but teaching me the whole time. I go, I can't believe I didn't see this. I just see it now. She's in tears and she goes, if I had my mom there, life would have been better, but I've been holding on to a fantasy that my life sucks and I'm not worth it because of my delusions about what happened, not what actually happened. And she got it. I'm the one that was responsible for that, no one else. And she just burst into tears and realized that, thank you, Mom. No dysfunction there. That was a gift. And she goes, wow, I wish I could have shared to my mom before she passed away how much I loved her and what she meant to me now. I said, just close your eyes and just let her be in the alternate world there. Just let it off your chest, get it out there. And she said this beautiful thing to her mom. And her perception, I said at the end, now, you've been an abandoned child? Is that the story you want to run? She goes, no. I was a blessed child, a mom who loved me and gave me opportunity I would never have had. It's like I was in a boarding school of specialists. I said, now you're saying thank you. Now you have a true story. The bullshit story that you had before is not the truth. And people were supporting that and taking advantage of that and exploiting that out of ignorance because of their own wounds in the past projected back onto you and thinking, well, I was wounded, so you're wounded, and now we both, have a pity party.
Yeah.
That's what's going on in the planet right now, is this victim thinking process instead of this mastery process. So I could go on with story after story after story of people that run their stories of that are in the way instead of on the way. When in fact, there is nothing going on in life except what's on the way once you've interpreted it wisely. It's all feedback. But we sometimes hold on to our fantasies and have all these torturing experiences to try to break our addiction to the fantasy. And we keep holding on to it and think those are bad, instead of those are actually breaking the fantasy that's leading to your crazies. Anyway, I could go for hours on this.
Yeah. I mean, it's like sitting at the foot of a master, truly. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm certainly going to re-listen to this over and over again. There's so much here, and how powerful our perceptions are. The story, change your story, change your perceptions, and you change your life. And so,
well, William James said the greatest discovery of his generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind.
Yes.
Well, wait. Why? The quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions we ask, because the questions we ask make us conscious of what's unconscious. And so when we're resentful, we're unconscious of the upside. So if we ask quality questions, what's the benefit? How did it serve us? What's the advantage of that happening? And what would be the drawback if it hadn't happened? And the way you fantasize it could have happened. See, the reason people are upset about COVID is very simple. They compare themselves to what it was before, and they compare themselves to the fantasy of what they want, and they're comparing their current reality, which is real, to something that isn't real. And anytime you compare reality to some fantasy, you're going to be depressed. And it ain't because of biochemical imbalance. That's a pharmaceutical game that was played in order to make extra cash. The reality is that biochemical imbalance ain't because of it's just an artificial biochemical imbalance. It's because you've stored in your subconscious mind fantasies, and now you're making nightmares, and those cause imbalances in chemistries, neurochemistries. If a lion came into the room and jumped in the room all of a sudden and salivated and was about to grab you with its jaws, and you did a blood test on you, you'd find biochemical imbalance. Your testosterone would go, your adrenaline would go up, your osteocalcium would go up, your dopamine, oxytocin, enkephalins, vasopressin, oxytocin, all those would go down. And you'd have an imbalanced chemistry, and you go to the therapist and you'd say, or your doctor or psychiatrist, say, well, you have a biochemical imbalance. No, you don't. You do, but that's not the cause. They've confused causes with correlates. The reality is that you have a perception. Now, what happens if that tiger jumped in with salivating and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to die. Oh my God. And then all of a sudden He stops and he stands up, and you look up, and it's Tony Tiger. And he said, "You're great." And all your life you wanted to meet Tony Tiger since childhood. And you find it and he hugs you. Now your chemistry is in 200 milliseconds, boom, change back into the other way. And now your endorphins are up, your estrogen is up, your, acetylcholine is up, all these other chemistries change, and dopamine goes up. The biochemical imbalance model is a false model to make people addicted to drugs. The real model is where the power is, and that's in you and your perceptions. You can change your perception, you can change your life. And change the actions by prioritizing your actions. Prioritize your actions, prioritize your perception, ask quality questions. Your life changes. That day, right there, changes.
Boom. Absolutely. And when you talk about genius, all the genius, what I'm hearing in all this is everything that we need is inside us already. And we just need to access it. Those questions. Nothing's missing. Nothing's missing. John, thank you so much for this. This was such a blessing, and I appreciate you spending the time. And oh man, I could go on for hours, but I know that you have other things to do, and we're going to wrap up here. I'm going to encourage our listeners to go to your website, Doctor, and we'll make sure this is all in the show notes, drdemartini.com. You have that determination values process there, which I actually did. And it was fascinating, the 13-step process to discovering your highest priorities. And very interesting process. I've done values exercises before. This one was very interesting, very in-depth. And so I appreciate you making that available to us. And it's free. So we'll make sure there's a link in our show notes as well. And again, thank you so much for sharing all this. And not just today, but all the things that you've shared, like 50 years worth of pouring your heart and your mind into this and your understanding into this. It's been such a gift, literally a gift to the world. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it because, you're helping me help the people I want to help. You're helping me reach people I wouldn't get to help. So thank you, because that was, I was told I would never be able to read, never be able to write, never be able to communicate, never amount to thing, never go very far in life when I was in first grade. I never got to thank that lady. She gave me exactly the voids I needed, because I ended up living on the streets. I was a street kid. Lived on the streets from 13 to 18. So if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had that journey. And so I wish I could have said thank you. I did it in my mind, and I felt, grateful for that. But it'd been lovely to meet that lady and say, what you did is catalyze a transformation in my life that wasn't evident for a while. But once it became evident, it's one of the most powerful things that happened in my life. So I'm a firm believer that you have a calling inside. Give yourself permission to let it out into the world. I'm a firm believer. If you're a man or a woman on a mission and with a message and a vision, give it to the world. Yes. Don't let anything or anybody, or not even yourself, ever interfere with what you know in your heart you want to bring to the world.
Yes. Well said. Well said. Well, I always say that leaders of transformation take action. So for our listeners and our viewers, take action on something that you heard today. There's so much here. You probably want to go back and listen to this multiple times. Of course, go get a copy of Dr. Martini's book, and and the copy of this determination value process. So we'll make sure that is all in the show notes. But take action on something today, even if it's asking yourself different questions, checking in and saying, like, what do I value? And where did those values come from? I mean, are they mine, or am I trying to live by somebody else's values? There's so much here to recap, and I just encourage you to take what you've learned here and do something with it. That's where transformation happens. So we encourage you to do that. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com and reach out to us there. We'd love to hear from you. You can also, of course, find us on social. And again, thank you, Dr. Demartini, for being here. And thank you for listening and tuning in. And we trust that this is going to make an impact in your life. You apply what you learned here today, it will make an impact in your life. And so thank you. We look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders of Transformation.